No phone calls, no messages, nothing but junk mail and overdue bills to keep me company. Seems nobody wants to hire a real private dick anymore, a professional like me. A guy who does the detective work nobody else wants to do. A guy who wears hats and walks around in a black and white world. I began contemplating a more profitable line of work, like politics.
We are the show you want to know. It's time to talk to you.
All right, folks, welcome. Jeez, we got a little echo there. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central. Let's do some housekeeping. You can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000 for the next hour. And you can also text us on our text line up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. It appears here on the screen in the studio in real time, and we'll work it into the conversation. Today, back at HQ, flying the board behind the glass. He'll get you set up and into the studio for two-way talk and conversation. And don't forget, we're streaming 24/7 to the TuneIn app like thousands of other radio stations do. So that's a great feature because that means you can take us anywhere. And I love that in and out of the car. You put it on your device and you're set to go. You can also tell Alexa to play WCRN, and she'll do that as well. Now, I'm also streaming it to my social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, so you can watch and listen on Facebook, X, Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile, and Rumble, or the station's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Multiple ways to watch, multiple ways to listen. Now, yesterday I mentioned and promised that we were going to have a very special guest joining us today, and that is happening. David Clements is joining us in our virtual studio. So first, let me invite into the conversation David, thank you so much. You're a very busy man, and you're working very hard. And when I learned about you and your voter fraud advocacy, I'm like, gotta get him. So welcome.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be with you.
And let me check your mic's a little soft here. Try that again, David.
Hey, Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. There we go. We'll boost you up a little bit. Again, thank you. Welcome to the show. Let's do the quick background here. For people, you're coming from academia. I mean, you're teaching at university level. You're a lawyer. Can you give us a little bit of your background as to before getting here today?
Sure. For the better part of a decade, I was a prosecutor. I oversaw 6 law enforcement agencies here in New Mexico. Have 8 first-degree murder convictions under my belt. Helped take down a drug trafficking organization. And after doing that for a while, I got my dream job at my alma mater to teach law at the business college here at New Mexico State University. When 2020 happened and the COVID lockdowns emerged, I was teaching consumer protection law and was in a place where I had to effectively defy many of the unconstitutional and illegal mandates at the university, or I would have lost all of my credibility. And simultaneously, the rigged 2020 election occurred, and I was very vocal about both the election, COVID, and J6. The fact that I saw a false flag where many of my countrymen were entrapped, and I recognized it very clearly as a person who was in law enforcement. And that was kind of like the holy trifecta of things you're just not allowed to talk about. So I had a giant bullseye on my back, but I came from a place where I had all the credentials. I was an award-winning professor. I was the prosecutor of the year. And as soon as I opened my mouth about 2020 in particular, I was canceled. And so to the degree that you're just learning about who I am most recently, just shows you how censored I've been. But if you Google my name, you'll see hit pieces from Reuters, NPR, the Washington Post, and they've created kind of this narrative of this tragic figure who was once promising, who lost his mind.
What happened to David? Where'd he go wrong?
Yeah.
He had a breakdown.
But yet, God is good because there's been vindication. Trump is back. There's been exposure. And 5 years later, it seems like the mainstream is finally seeing what people with common sense saw on day one.
That's amazing. That's amazing. There's a lot to bite off there because you're also dealing with COVID issues. and 20. And it's funny how you say then 2020 happened. Every time you hear that phrase, David, and somebody says, then 2020 happened, there's going to be a good story, right? Because it has to do with violating our constitutional rights, our civil liberties. Somebody either had to bend the knee and get the jab in order to feed their family, or they lost a good job and promising career. It derailed you. It sent you off into a new path, right? You're at a very different place than if the pandemic never happened. And I get it. I mean, knock on wood, they've tried to cancel me, but this is a station that stands by me, so it's been good. But yeah, you get attacked for asking the questions, just for asking and saying this doesn't look right. And particularly, and anyone who's a regular listener to this show knows my feeling on voter fraud. And before we joined, I mean, I ran through some things, and I want to make sure that they make sense to you as well. And I've always said, look, we need to have paper ballots. We can't have this LCD screens and digital. It makes no sense to mix that kind of technology with voting. Paper ballots. And the most sophisticated machine that we need at a polling place is a simple counter. How many ballots were slid into that slot? How many ballots are supposed to be in that lockbox? That's really all that needs to be done. And then a chain of custody, right? That has to get from that polling place to the clerk's office, not in employees' trunks that somebody remembers, oh yeah, there's another suitcase of ballots in my car. No, every box should be accounted for. In same-day voting, this start voting months before the election day. And if we remember, we had states who said, we'll accept mail-in ballots with no postmark and postmarked after the election day. In what world does that make any sense? So we got to go to paper ballots. I don't think any of these computers connected to voter and tallying should ever be on the internet. There's no reason for that. Once you're on the internet, you're anywhere in the world, and anyone with the skills can hack into that and have access to it. So I think these are some basic things. I think we concur with that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would take it one step further on going to hand counting at the precinct level. And it's not to say that if you use old school counters or machines, that is a massive upgrade compared to using digital software where you can have a nation state attack. But unfortunately, I've researched this to the degree that I've looked at subversions going back all the way, 100 years. And there was a time in which people would actually file down the gears on the mechanical machines. Think of your odometer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you mess with the mileage, you could have a car that never has more than 1,000 miles on it. And you could sell a car that's got low miles. Well, there were people that actually figure out how to file down the gears on some of the mechanical counters. And usually what happens is you'll have these psyops where people will exploit weaknesses in the current system, but it's always to give us a even worse type of system. So case in point, we were using mechanical machines for the most part up until the infamous hanging Chad incident in Florida.
Sure.
And so like people were losing their minds like, oh, wow, this is just such a terrible thing that the hole didn't punch all the way through the Chads. And that was the pretext to introduce the Help America Vote Act and have everything computerized. And so while there was controversy surrounding that one county in Florida, I actually think that was a huge psyop to get us to the computers. So if we really want to solidify elections, what you want are your neighbors counting the votes where it's out in the open. You don't have to trust them. In fact, the system works better when you don't trust them because you're watching them.
Mm-hmm.
You have your one table counting ballots by Republicans.
And they can't put pizza boxes up on the window, right?
They can't. And what it also does is it makes the precinct judges really the lords of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, CNN doesn't get to call a race at 8:00 p.m. Most of your ballot is actually precinct based. You might have some statewide races, but wouldn't it be great if you could take to the bank that you've got the right vote for the judges, the district attorneys, the state reps, the people that are in your backyard, solve that problem. So it's really not a big deal. Even the hand counting, most precincts, you've got less than 1,000 people. Sometimes it's 300 people. So if we can trust that people can count to 300 in a full day, you've really solved the problem. And for the people that are skeptical about it, I asked them, what do you think we did for over 150 years in this country?
Yeah.
It was exactly that, and it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. It worked for a very long time before this technology came in. And I wanted to talk a little bit. Well, we're kind of against, we got to take a break in a minute here. But when we come back, David, maybe talk a little bit about irregularities versus error versus fraud. And I know that in a guy in broadcasting and the media here, I'm frustrated when I see people, especially these very high-paid people on network news, who are very sloppy in their terminology. I think Stephanopoulos had to pay $16 million because he doesn't know the difference between rape and, slander, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very frustrating. So I think when we use the terms, irregularity or error or fraud, they should be specific to what it actually is. So maybe we can get into that one aspect. I mean, there's many aspects to get to, but I really want to get to the 2020 election too, and what your research has found out there as well. And when you saw the irregularities in 2020, what was your first step? Was it to look at the news, or was it to go try to get the data?
Yeah, for me, I'm a primary sources guy. So when I was a trial attorney, you get used to what kind of evidence you can actually bring into a court of law. So I was probably the first person of record that secured thousands of affidavits, sworn statements from poll watchers, observers. And this is a big deal because they're telling you that if you find out that I'm lying, you can put me in prison for 10 years. And you'll find out there wasn't a single prosecution of any person that filled out a sworn affidavit, yet those were disregarded. So that was my first foray into it. And then the other thing was just because there was such censorship.
David, I'll hold you right there because it's a set break. It's not a floating. Our guest here is David Clements. David is a former prosecutor, former university instructor, who has become a very prominent and maybe controversial voice in the election integrity movement. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. 508-871-7000. Stick with us. Back in 2 and 2, folks.
WCRN, where the left and the right meet in the middle. All
right, we can talk. We're still streaming, but we're not on the radio air.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, when we come back, let's go to that, because I think we need to set the ground rule here as to those terms and what they mean, because I'm sure some irregularities become fraud if you look at them close enough.
Yeah, great question.
Whether you're going across town or across state lines, and then we'll take it from there. These are hard breaks, and they're only 2 minutes. They're quick, boom, boom, and that's just the clock.
Okay.
So I'll reset us. Big family homes. They handle it all with care, speed, and professionalism. Got a piano, gun safe, or hot tub? No problem. Their specialty moving services are designed for the heavy stuff most movers just won't touch. So why settle for basic move when you can move mighty? Call 978-793-6165 or visit mightymoversma.com, mightymoversma.com, and start your move the mighty way. Mighty Movers, moving you forward one mighty mile at a time.
WCRN Radio is thrilled to bring back a legendary voice, and now you can help tell the stories. Paul Harvey captivated millions with his unique style and unmistakable voice. By sponsoring the rest of the story, your brand can become a part of this rich tradition, and it links your business with a program that people love and trust. So don't miss this unique opportunity to grow your business while becoming part of something truly special. For sponsorship details, just go to WCRNradio.com.
Headline news, weather, and local information central to your day on Radio Central 830 WCRN.
All right, folks. Welcome back here to the second segment of the Tuesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central, reminding you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. That's how you get into the studio for two-way talk and conversation, or text us at 617-297-8388. And in studio, a virtual studio with me, is David Clements. And David is a former professor and prosecutor, and I actually hadn't known about your very successful prosecutorial days. You've got some serious convictions behind you, so you might know your way around a courtroom. So,
Yeah, well, I've done several thousand evidentiary hearings, so I'm comfortable in a courtroom, and that's kind of what guided the way that I've been looking at election fraud, which is you start to see similarities between drug trafficking, which was one of my expertise. I was the senior HIDA attorney, so HIDA's high intensity drug trafficking areas. I'm here on the border, and vote trafficking. The phenomena is almost identical. You've got a interfacing between the drug cartels and drug trafficking organizations, which are regional. And you've got this thing called an election cartel, and they carry out their cheat through regional county offices. And in many respects, the county clerks are useful idiots. They don't even know that the cheat's being deployed at a nation state level. So a lot of them will still protest that everything that they do is pure as the driven snow, and they have no idea that
which is the best useful idiot there is.
Yeah,
Someone who
because
has no idea.
they'll defend the system.
Yeah, exactly. I want to really get into that in the patterns and so forth. But I teased going into it that I did want you to break down for listeners, irregularities versus the errors versus the fraud, because I'm assuming that something that looks like an irregularity often can be a fraud, but you don't start off as a fraud. So could we define those terms, and how do they play a role in you being able to see these patterns? And as I've said, and I don't remember whether it was on air or off air, but I've talked many times on this show about looking at that 2020 election from the 30,000 point of view and saying, guys, this mathematically, this doesn't make sense. So those terms, let's define them on how they're used legally for you.
Yeah. So for me, they can be interchangeable. There's a sliding scale, but when I think of fraud, I think of a cause of action that requires intent. So every crime has what we call mens rea, the mental state, and the actus rea, the act. And so you can have people that are unwittingly participating in a fraudulent system, and they're not committing fraud because they don't have the sufficient mental state. Also, you have to be cognizant that any cartel or criminal organization, part of being successful is to conceal any evidence of what you're doing. And so you'll see election vendors like Dominion or ES&S always give you a root cause analysis where it was human error. It can't be the machines that they manufacture and sell. So there's a conflation. There's people are warring for the microphone on defining the problem. And so for me, I think it's really helpful to understand that there's three levels of fraud, as the way I see it. You've got garden variety level 1 fraud. And this is what most people believe exists, which is there's a voter that might find an extra ballot and he puts it in a drop box. It's wrong, but it's small. Or maybe like back in the day when unions would carry around their weight trying to say, hey, vote for this person or else. That's level 1. And I don't think we'll ever be free of that. That will always be a problem that we have in the system. Level 2 is where you have a person who holds a position of trust, like a clerk, like an election supervisor, and behind closed doors, due to their access, they can do things that favor certain candidates. We'll never be free of that, and that's always existed. The thing that I focus on is level 3, which is a nation-state ability to control hardware and software, where you can change tallies independent of anyone downstream. And that's really the main problem that we're faced with. Now, so to the degree that you can prove fraud, because there's a burden of proof, and you want to get away from terms like irregularities or deviations, it really comes down to the expertise of the person who understands the system. So what someone might chalk off as a deviation or an irregularity, The more you know, and the more that you can piece things together, that this is an assembly line, input to output, that has all kinds of different vectors for attack, then you look at the totality of the system. And the problem when you're debating people is that they might inhabit a part of that architecture and they could truly be innocent. They may not know that the vector for attack is down the assembly line and it may have nothing to do with them. So that's kind of the world that we live in. But for just to kind of answer your question, fraud is a crime. So there's a burden of proof that you have to not only afford an individual that's accused of it of due process, but you have to also wait it out in a courtroom.
Mhm.
And so one of the major barriers is that you'll find out that many of the attorney generals, prosecutors, sheriffs have had major financial donations given to them by people like George Soros, and they're gatekeepers. And so the ability to present a case, have a grand jury preside over it, has been eviscerated in places like Michigan. You
Mhm.
had Dana Nessel, who was going after the dueling electors. You had the sheriff in Maricopa County that had $2 million in donations from Soros adjacent type groups. And then you've got the knowledge now that Act Blue has been investigated, and this is a giant donor mule money laundering operation that really funds the election cheating enterprise. And so when you look at just the immensity and the sophistication of this, my work as a prosecutor going after cartels and drug trafficking pales in comparison into something that I really stumbled into. I didn't think it was this bad, but the more that I start, scratching the surface,
Sure.
you come back and say, it's way worse than any of us could have imagined. And the latest proof that's going to really rock people was the capture of Maduro. People are thinking, well, this is about oil, this is about drugs. It's
Yeah.
about those things.
Can
But
you explain this? Because didn't Venezuela strangely play a role with Dominion? And Dominion, how does Dominion win lawsuits for slander and so forth? Yet it sounds as though you seem confident that they actually had something to do with the wrongdoing.
yeah,
And it wasn't just an error. And I agree 100%, right? It's always it's a human error. I mean, every airplane accident, it always goes to the pilot, never to the Boeing, right? I mean, the same thing here, because it would lose all credibility. And I mean, doesn't Dominion control a good portion, or not control, that's a poor word, but aren't they used in a good portion of our states?
yes. 48% of the election jurisdictions use Dominion, now Liberty Vote, because they were acquired. That's a whole nother discussion. But
Yeah.
in order to keep things kind of straight, you'll find that the genesis of the election machines that we use start off with this company called Smartmatic, and that was used in Venezuela through really, really smart people that the cartels basically wanted to bring in these software engineers to create a system where they could start controlling governments, police chiefs. And they were successful in a referendum election involving Hugo Chavez. So this was before Maduro. And lo and behold, they were so successful that they started exporting this technology to other countries where their product was sold and trafficked.
It's a Bond villain, David. I mean, it's a Bond movie, right?
It's
Control
Spectre.
the world through elections.
Yeah, it is.
And Spectra. Spectra is controlling
Spectre.
everything.
Well, so this is all emerging in the early 2000s, but the relationship to America started to develop when Smartmatic engineers started getting into our country around 2006. And the relationship to Dominion and ES&S is that it doesn't matter what tabulator brand you use, whether it's ES&S, Dominion, Hardin, or Civic, the same exact software design is on those tabulators. It's a Smartmatic software design. That's the through line. But they started looking at the election and handled and orchestrated the election in Cook County, Illinois, where a young up-and-coming senator by the name of Barack Obama, relatively new on the scene, was able to upset Hillary Clinton, who was known to everyone, and it catapulted him into the presidency. So when you start seeing the evolution of our rigged system throughout the United States, you can follow the trail of Barack Obama, the creation of entities like the Center for Internet Security, their partnership with the Atlantic Council, which was known for creating consensus for globalist Marxist talking points overseas, being deployed stateside. So there's been this evolution and growth where, you might at first look at Obama and Hillary as being part of the same team. And I think they are part of the same team if you pull back the curtain and just look at their philosophies. But there's always a power vacuum. There's always a struggle between people it's like a cartel. You've got the different criminal families all jockeying for influence. But that's where it emerged in the United States. And what we would see is that as we would see cheating being exposed and caught, there would be consistent rebranding. So you'd have Sequoia turning into Dominion, or ES&S being acquired by this company or this company. And so over time, you get so confused because there's so many vendors, right, and it provides the visage that you've got a free market. And it's not that. They're actually all companies that are intelligence-backed entities that have the same functional capabilities. And so when you see a company broken down and selling their assets to another company, look at the foot traffic. It's the same designer. So Eric Coomer, who's been in the news as one of the main guys over at Dominion, started off with Sequoia, which was part of Smartmatic. And so every time the heat gets too hot for these vendors, they retool, they rebrand, and then we're sold a bag of, a bill of goods, like somehow we've solved the problems. There's corrections taking place, but it's the same dang code in those machines.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's a big problem.
We're going to take our mid-show break here, folks. So we're going to take a pause, 2 minutes and 2 seconds, just reminding you that our guest in virtual studio joining me here is David Clements, and he is an expert on voter fraud, as well as January 6th, as well as COVID, but it's an hour show. So we're going to stick with the voter fraud incident for today, and hopefully you'll come back, David, another time. But hey, folks, stay tuned. 2 minutes, 2 seconds. We'll be back on the other side.
Time now for the forecast from the Boston Independence Group Weather Center. Call Jerry Doherty today at 877-772-1776. Retirement is within reach.
I'm meteorologist Sherry Spear, and here's the latest Boston 25 weather on Radio 830 WCRN. We've got a nice, bright day ahead, calm winds, high temperatures in the 40s. It's going to feel a little more like March than January for the next few days. In fact, tomorrow it's going to be up around 50 degrees with just a couple spot showers around. Mostly cloudy, mostly dry weather expected for your Wednesday. I'm meteorologist Sherry Spear, and you can hear Boston 25 live for the morning drive weekdays on AM 830 WCRN.
More live and local radio is next. Stay tuned to Radio Central, 830 WCRN.
This is Jerry Doherty, host of Making Money Last, right here on WCRN. Like all business owners, I'm interested in why people choose to work with Boston Independence Group. So I asked my clients. The most common response, Jerry does not try to be all things to all people. Boston Independence Group is specialized, focused solely on retirement planning. My customers enjoy the difference. We do one thing, and we do it exceptionally well. Help other people live better in retirement. That's it. If you're ready to retire or making plans to retire, we can do for you what we've done for hundreds of other retirees throughout New England. Live better in retirement. Just give me a call. I'll show you how. My toll-free number is 877-772-1776. Again, that number is 877-772-1776. And you can visit us on the web at bostonindependencegroup.com. bostonindependencegroup.com.
I'm Lee Gaudette from Gaudette Insurance and the Gaudette Insurance Show. You're listening to Radio Central, AM 830 WCRN.
right, folks. Welcome back here to the second half of the Tuesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central. And again, you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. That's how you get into the studio for two-way talking conversation. My in-studio guest, David Clements, who is a former professor, a former prosecutor, but for the last, 5 years, David, you've been working on everything from voter fraud to January 6th to the COVID issues and pandemic issues. And I do want to get in, we got a call to go to, but I do want us to get into some of the specifics. And I love the term, the F curve, the fraud curve that has been coined here. And I look at the Georgia elections and they stopped, I think, at 10:30. And I think everyone with common sense and a functioning IQ said, this is a reset going on. And then we see the videos. First there was the thing about the pipe, send everybody home. We had the whole problem with observers, the pizza boxes, and not letting them close. And then we see them pull these suitcases out when everybody's supposed to be home. And we've got ballots that it's on video, a woman putting the same ballot out of the machine back in the machine. And I know there are instances where if you take these batches, you see the same, say, little quirk in a circle with the tail or the shape of it seems to match everything. In other words, it looks like a photocopy of the same ballot that has been scanned. So there are instances that, with all your work and research, can you point to and say, this is clearly fraud? And if we had a fair trial of this, hearing of this, and evidence presented, you're confident people would come to the same conclusion?
I'm confident if we could.
I'm sorry, your microphone was down a little bit. Sorry about that, David. Go ahead.
I'm confident to the degree that you would have cases heard before courtrooms that aren't captured. Because what people have to understand is that you've got judges that appear on these ballots. The last thing they want to do is have anyone questioning whether or not an election in which they appeared on a ballot, that would disturb their own power. So if people are wondering, well, why aren't the judges ruling on it? Do you understand what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, the senators couldn't declare Caesar crazy because then his appointments of senators wouldn't be valid. Right?
Exactly.
I mean,
but yeah, let's talk about the F curve or the fraud curve. And there's two things that are going on right now, because you've got a way to alter the tallies on the black boxes themselves. But what you're seeing on the F curve isn't the actual tallies within the vote counting machines. That's on election night reporting. And this is just as important. So election night reporting is accomplished through uploading results to this company called SCOTUS. SCOTUS actually is housed in Spain. It's a foreign company. So we are sending or transmitting our election data overseas to a company that's located in Spain.
Who decided that? Who's the brilliant politician that allowed national security to be compromised with a foreign country controlling election data?
Well, I think this really starts with George W. Bush. And when you understand that this is, the uniparty, I've come to the point where the Democrats are easier to spot, but you have to understand that the computers came in under George Bush's watch. And then you've got kind of this pendulum switch from Republican politicians that we loathe to Democratic politicians that we loathe. And they're building out this architecture that does not serve the American people. So be that as it may, SCOTUS exists in Spain. And what they do is they will upload the data in two places. One, through Edison, which is your TV screen. So when you're watching Fox News or CNN, you see that tracker at the bottom that gives you an update of vote totals. And then you have the actual Secretary of State websites where you can refresh and see the vote tallying there. That's not necessarily the actual vote tallying. These are projections, as they would say.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when we started scraping the data and they would provide these interval reports, we would see vote deletion, vote oscillation, which makes no sense because in any voting process, you should only see additions. because you're waiting for more tallies. The votes come up. Well, we were seeing basically an algorithm at work that was trying to solve the problem that is we the people, in the sense that there are pre-selected candidates. And so to prove this, what was happening on election day is Trump is outperforming all of the cheaters modeling, because the in-person voting was just through the roof. And so they had a set point that they thought they could arrive at to account for the influx of mail-in ballots that are being dropped off in drop boxes. Well, wouldn't you know, the people that were showing up were disturbing those set points. And so what you saw on TV was, hey guys, we got to stop counting. We got to stop counting. So when you look at the digital record of the Edison reports, you saw this thing called the Edison Zero. Everything shut down and was canceled out. They reset it, created new set points. And in the dark of night, what you saw was tons of physical ballots being flooded in the dark of night in places like the State Farm Building, places in Wayne County, in Detroit. Because while you can alter the digital perception of where the tally stands on the TV, you have to have a paper trail that eventually supports that. So what they did is they didn't want to have network TV stations state that Trump was winning. So they had to change the perception by saying, okay, we're going to stop it right now. And then when they did the reboot and they waited for 12 hours, all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of votes that all went to Biden materialized. So that F curve that we're seeing was a digital insertion of votes that were largely fictitious. The paper ballots hadn't even arrived yet, but they had to fuel the perception that Biden somehow was
I got to
coming in.
ask in the middle of this, because with this going on, the people who are carrying those suitcases of ballots and pulling the boxes out, they've got to know what they're doing, right? I mean, are you able to get somebody so low IQ that they don't understand that they're feeding erroneous or fake ballots right now? I mean, they have to be part of this conspiracy, don't they?
They do. So in some places, the mens rea of the participants is overt, and we're talking about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss in particular, where you had cameras that showed them rescanning the same ballots over and over again. Some people actually did the math on the number of duplicates that they observed physically being put through. It accounted for about 38,000 votes in favor of Biden. So the margin of victory was around 10, 11,000. They made sure that Trump was going to lose just from their actions. So when we talked about level 2 fraud, about people that were given access or were custodians, that's a perfect example of level 2 fraud, where they came in and started feeding those tabulators to rig the vote. They've been protected. They're not paying the legal fees. They were surrounded by Dominion lawyers and high-powered people. You had President Biden award them the highest civilian honor by placing medals around their necks in the White House. So they're heavily protected.
They got him there. So.
They got him there, right? And I know many people that they have sued that have had to go through the most despicable lawfare when it's all on videotape. And not only that, there's this thing called SHA files that were wiped when it came to certain time frames that would have, you would have been able to compare the timestamps, if you will, of what they were doing on the computer forensics. And so you're dealing with a cover up from people like Gabriel Sterling, Raffensperger, going on 60 Minutes, basically saying, no, this was completely justified, even though there were no Republican observers, even though they were counting votes at 2:00 in the morning, even though they violated every rule, they whitewashed it and made it seem like it was completely normal by gaslighting the American people. And because it's 60 Minutes, a one-time trusted news source.
Yeah, one time.
The American people bought it.
Yeah. They paid another. There's another outlet that had to pay Donald Trump for some creative editing as well. Let's go to the phones, folks. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Ken's been waiting patiently. Hey, Ken, you're on with David and myself. What say you?
Hello, David. I have a simple question. What can be done from now till November of 2026? Because the likelihood is the Democrats will acquire the House in the next vote, and if something isn't done at federal level, then there's not an answer there. Or are there states that are actively looking to make firewalls to somehow reduce or prevent some of what you've described?
Great question. I would say this: there's a twofold solution. One is that the American people have to show up to their county commissions on a regular basis, because the county commissions are typically the canvassing board. They're the de facto canvassing board. And after you run an election, they will either certify the canvass, approve it, or they can reject it. Now, they've been bullied into you can never do anything but certify. But there's got to be a level of representation for the people that are tasked with evaluating the receipts. And when something is fraudulent, they should vote no. And so that's something that we can do if we can give them a roadmap. And I think that you're not going to see the same level of weaponization that happened under Biden's regime, where people could say no now, and there's no one at the U.S. DOJ that's going to attack a county commission that says we're not going to certify this. But the more impactful thing is what Trump's already doing, which is he has launched a series of executive orders, and he's got to be able to operate in a national security paradigm, meaning you have to count on Congress working against him. You have to count on courts not wanting to do what he says. So is there a way that he can enact voter integrity edicts, if you will, but it's completely from his plenary authority as commander-in-chief? And the answer is yes. Under his Article 2 power, he can absolutely run federal races. You know, he won't be able to deal with the entire ballot because the constitutions allow the states to set the time, place, and manner for how they conduct elections. But when it comes to the House and the Senate, those are federal races. So he can actually have executive orders on a national security framework. And the law that I'm pointing to is this thing called FISMA. The Federal Information Security Management Act deals with cyber intelligence, cyber that's moving back and forth in our computers. Elections have been designated as part of the nation's critical infrastructure. So we have laws on the books that if he's going to effectuate them having any meaning, he can actually send out executive orders to protect that critical infrastructure.
David, got to hold you there. Hold that thought, because we got our third final break, folks. We're going to do that. 508-871, David Clements, back in 2 and 2. Stick with us.
Tired of rush doctor's visits? Are you finding it tough to get a doctor's appointment? And when you finally do, are you in and out before you know it? Did your doctor take the time to ask about your diet or exercise routine? Did they order the right lab tests? And how do you know if these are the labs you need and how to interpret them? Discover the freedom of ordering your own lab tests. Phil George, clinical biochemist and health coach, can guide you on which blood tests to order. Customized to your personal health goals, Phil's extensive training ensures that you receive the best advice on interpreting your lab results and understanding their implications. Plus, by ordering labs on your own, you'll pay far below insurance prices. Looking for an alternative to conventional medicine? Phil George can help you navigate your health journey with a personalized approach. Just email Phil at philgeorge@charter.net for a free consultation. Your health and well-being are within reach, and it starts with the right guidance. Don't miss this opportunity to take control of your health. Reach out today and embark on a path to better health with Phil George.
Hi, I'm Lee Gaudette of the Gaudette Insurance Agency, a third-generation family business based in Whitensville with branch office locations in Grafton, Shrewsbury, Westboro, and Southborough. We are a full-service independent agency offering all aspects of insurance to businesses, families, and individuals. We are in the peace of mind business. Call, click, or come in to see us at any of our locations for a free assessment of your insurance needs. Also, listen to Radio Central WCRN every Friday morning at 9:30 for the Gaudette Insurance Show.
The best Italian cuisine served by some of the nicest folks you'll ever meet is at Zidi's Italian Trattoria. It's fine Italian cooking at the Speedway Shopping Center, 290 Turnpike Road in Westboro. It's like sitting down with your family for an authentic home-cooked Italian meal. From intimate dinners to catering for events of all sizes. From pizzas and calzones to classic Italian dinners. Every meal at Zidi's is one you'll remember. Head on down to Zidi's, 290 Turnpike Road in Westboro.
All right, folks, welcome back here to the fourth and final segment on Tuesday's edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central. Again, you can join the conversation for the time we have left together at 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. In virtual studio with me is David Clement, and we've been talking about election or rather voter fraud. And we only have, this segment left, David, and you made the reference, to the F curves and set points. Can we dive into that a little bit more? Because the F point in that workflow, right? Ballot scanning, adjudication, batching, central tabulation, EMS reporting, unofficial media reports, as you made reference to. And when we look at all that, how is this happening, and how are we going to somebody's got to go to jail, don't they? Doesn't somebody have to go to jail for stealing an election?
They do. And the good news is that you've got a grand jury impaneled in Florida that started in January 12th. And you've got referrals for people like John Brennan. And so if you're sitting there going, well, who's John Brennan? Well, John Brennan, it was at the head of many of the intelligence agencies that help proliferate these machines. What I want people to understand is that the dominions of the world did not emerge on the scene without the intelligence agencies, the CIA, placing them there, because it gives them ability to control economies, control the military-industrial complex. We're talking about the greatest control tool that's out there. Now, we've been meddling in elections overseas. We just never thought it would happen behind,
matter of time
from within, but it's here. So I would look at the grand jury that's been assembled in Florida as a huge development. Even today, Bill Clinton was supposed to appear for his deposition. We've learned that he was a no-show, which means there's going to have to be a warrant issued for his arrest. If Hillary follows suit, she's scheduled for tomorrow. These are all architects, or at least facemen, for the election cheat. They were all part of the usurping of the American people's votes. So I would say that you might be surprised at how rapid these referrals and indictments start heading our way, because as the last caller mentioned, like we have an election this year we've got to secure. And I think Trump, as long as he has the national security framework in place, he can do things lawfully with the federal races. But I want to say one thing. For those of you that are worried about the statewide ballots, don't forget that the computers that you use in your state were largely provided by you guys wanting HAVA funds. Mm-hmm. So those are federal funds. Trump could actually direct Scott Bessent at the Treasury to cancel disbursements to the states, that you're not going to use election machines that compromise our national security. And so that's another tool. So there's lots of things at play right now. I'm actually more hopeful and confident than I've ever been, because Trump is also talking about using the Insurrection Act, because you've got all of these protests happening in, guess what? Fraud epicenters throughout the country. And what's going on with Somalia, the banking fraud, is all part of the same election corruption. A lot of the things that we're seeing in with the Somali pirates in Minneapolis, these were people that were used as mules to corrupt our elections there. Mm-hmm. And you've got iterations just like that in California, Arizona, Georgia. So you probably want to have as wholesale of a picture of all these things happening at once. I know it's hard to keep up with, but Trump has put out some messaging out there in the past weeks, days, and months that things are going to get hot really quickly. And I think it's actually going to bode well for Americans in our elections going forward.
But like so many things, that Trump has been right on, or Trump will talk about, we're relying on the media to convey it, and convey it in a way that people understand really what's going on. Because I see this slant, and right away, Trump is a dictator. He wants to do all this stuff, where what he's trying to do is, to your point, secure the elections. Look at the integrity of it, if he needs to federalize those, and how he can do that. And, he's at a point in his life. He is, when they try to say he's just a crook and so forth, look, I'm sure Donald Trump has some very interesting business practices over his decades of building in New York City. Okay. But right now, I truly think he is really looking out for the country, for the American people, and he's being fought at every turn on this. I wasn't aware that a jury was convened in February in Florida. I don't see that in the mainstream media at all. And if I don't see it, I'm sure a lot of other people don't see that. And we hear these things about charges, but the media is trying to spin this as, oh, it's political. Everything's political with Trump. It's all political. I think he's righting the ship.
I agree. I even had the chairman of the Federal Reserve give an announcement that he's been referred for criminal prosecution. So, like, never in my lifetime did I think that the chairman of the Federal Reserve would be prosecuted. That's happening. I mean, we've all known about the Federal Reserve being one of the big bads in, devaluing the
What's
dollar.
the alleged charges with that, though? For what it? I mean, for the fraud on building the building that cost 10 times what it should, or
Well, he testified before Congress,
Oh,
and so
okay.
they're about the building projects, and you're looking at buildings that we're not talking about running over budget. I think one of them has cost we the people over $3 billion with a B. And so they're revisiting some of the statements that he made because they had all kinds of receipts on the real math for these buildings. So he has likely perjured himself, and he basically put out a video letting everyone know that this is really Trump going after me because I won't lower interest rates, and it's inappropriate on his part. And yet the American people are completely standing with the president that, of course, we need the interest rates to be lowered. We can't get homes. We can't buy homes. They're being purchased by BlackRock and Vanguard. So
Which
for a
must have put
tyrant,
stop
Trump,
to that too.
and Trump put a stop to that. He has also put a stop to the usury interest rates for some of the credit card companies. So for a guy who's a tyrant, he sure is doing a lot to help.
Not a very
the
good
little guy.
tyrant, man. You know, he's about as good of a tyrant as he is a racist.
Yeah.
Right. When you look at his history in that as well. But the thing that, you said earlier, and I know this is a big throwback here on the show because we've covered a lot, David, is the predetermined points that these companies you're saying have. And we watched it. And of course, and I saw the videos of the oscillate, right? That, votes going up and then votes going down. And that's my first thought. How do you unvote? How do you take a vote away? Everything should just be a constant, like the raising the money, things are added to it. If you see the thermometer for the funds going down, well, you got something fishy going on. Same thing. How can votes oscillate? How can you gain and lose votes in that predetermined point? Are you saying it's pretty much irrelevant what the votes are because the computers have already been set to what to come to?
It's a combination of many things. So this is how I would describe it. 6 months before an election, you'll see a bulking of the voter rolls. And this is the thing that drives me crazy because people will brag about cleaning up your voter rolls.
Purge.
They'll purge it.
Always purge it.
But pay attention, 3 months later, they're rebloated. And so you've got a credit line of votes that you can do something with. And what you also see is the emergence of independent voters, usually occupying about 30% of the voter roll base in states, which is BS. No one believes that 30% of your population will opt out of voting in a primary. So most people hold their nose and they stay in the Republican column or the Democrat column. But they bulked up this independent voter. And the reason why I bring this up is that if you're going to create a fake or fraudulent ballot, typically what you do is everyone has a voter ID number. Even illegal immigrants that are processed here are assigned a voter ID number. So what do? You can generate a fake ballot, vote it for them in a drop box, and those people are what we would call no propensity voters. They will never show up and confront an election worker that, what do you mean someone already voted for me? Yeah. So what they do is
they don't even know they're registered sometimes. So
they'll generate the ballots assigned to a real person. And in early voting, that's where they try to basically war game this out to where it's already won in the 3 weeks prior to election day because they know exactly how many votes they need to stuff. So when you see the data that we presented, you'll always see this huge spike for the preferred or pre-selected candidate. And then over time, it will drive down to a predetermined set point that gives you a believable margin of victory, because no one's going to believe that someone got 90% of the votes. But what they do is they spike it and flood the tabulators during early voting with these fake ballots. And it will settle in almost always into like a 60-40, 51-49 victory. So what you see on election day, where the computers come in, is that in swing states, the voter registration is fairly even. So it's easy to war game and screw someone in like Wyoming for Republicans. It's easy to screw people in Washington, D.C. for Democrats, for your preferred uniparty candidate. But in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, the registration profile is so dead even that that's where you start fine-tuning and tweaking things with, hey, really quick, let's get some more ballots stuffed in that drop box for that candidate. We got to reboot the set points and have things done in the dark of night. It's only in those swing states you'll notice that. So they're doing massive damage control on election day, and you'll see the narratives. And a lot of, unfortunately, Republicans have embraced these narratives that we need more time to vote. We need to have early voting. We need a master mail-in voting just like the Democrats. And they don't understand that the cheat is industrial. It's not like these Democrats are scouring waste baskets in a nursing home, and that's how they're baiting us. They have industrial printing presses that create
on this.
hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
David, we're running against the clock. Where can people find you in your social media platforms? Where can people locate you or listen to you or watch your videos?
Yeah. So if you go to my website, it's theprofessorsrecord.com. And no matter where you're at on social media, there's a button that you can find me. So if you're on X, I'm on X. If you're on Truth, I'm on Truth. If you're on Facebook, just click the button. But my website, theprofessorsrecord.com. And I put out a Substack every Sunday morning that gives people my reflections on what's going on. And please subscribe there if you feel led.
And interesting, we were talking before we came on, and you're seeing a resurgence of, in all places, Facebook, of people finding you and following you.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting.
The gatekeepers are letting people tell the truth all of a sudden.
There you go. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up today's show, the Tuesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, David, so much for joining us. Fantastic show. We could go on and on about this. Back tomorrow afternoon, same bad time, same bad channel. Don't forget, this is turned into a podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Go out, folks.